and said war is waged over just these three. I didn't come here to West Virginia for God. Back in London, Harris is the top man. But here, deep in the hills of Appalachia, Harris has a mate, an oil man, Preston.
Look at you.
So here we are, invested in an oil operation. Preston needs cash flow. Harris needs a cleaner.
I got a loan.
I'm an oil man.
There's so much more. I love you.
Fiona, she's missing.
I need you in London.
I'm not leaving till I find her. Fiona's dead.
She was sitting right there with Preston's boy.
The oil boys.
Yeah, what are you doing here?
Nasty scratch you got there.
Oh, you know, had a little bit of a dust up.
You're looking for answers. Don't do it. Think of the money. Thousands of dollars without breaking a sweat. A new life.
I don't want a new life.
Getting on the bad side of Preston doesn't make life easier.
It's a situation that needs finesse.
If I can't stop a beast like him, then what's my purpose?
You ain't gonna go lightly.
I guess we're at odds then.
Retribution.
Retribution.
I didn't come here to West Virginia for God.
James Woods is interesting to go through. You go through, especially you go through that 70s, 80s era, and you find a lot of like forgotten gems.
Did you ever see Fast Walking? That's one I always like to, or Cop is another one.
Cop, yes.
I thought
Fast
Cop,
Walk.
yeah.
So yeah.
I haven't seen Fast Walking though. That's a new one.
Fast Walking, he made with James B. Harris, who also made Cop before, and he's a prison guard / pimp in the South. And I mean, what else would you expect James Woods to be? So yeah,
that's kind of dark, like The Gambler with James Caan.
Yeah.
That kind of goes to a whole nother level of dark that not everyone. Buddy said to me in Venice, he was like, "You haven't seen The Gambler?" You get defensive because you haven't seen all 10 million movies. You got to see The Gambler, man, with James Caan. It goes where it goes dark places you never thought movies went. So I went to Vidiots, rented it on VHS tape. I was like, wow, yeah.
Nice. Oh, the good old Vidiots.
John Jarrell, John Jarrell, writer of Romeo's Must Die. That's credit to him. He's the one who accosted me on the streets of Venice and said, "You gotta watch The Gambler, man. You can't call yourself a screenwriter or director if you haven't watched The Gambler." That's my trauma.
That became a running joke for us, like when we were starting in college, where it was like, you're a film student and you haven't seen like whatever, and then we just continued it through like the rest of our life. You're a filmmaker and you haven't seen this. You haven't seen Bikini Car Wash and you're a filmmaker.
Exactly.
Ballet Girls? Did you not see that? Like, yeah. So I used to work for Amoeba Records for a long time. So that was kind of like my one of my film schools, I call it.
Yeah, for sure.
But a great on the Vidiots call out there, Scott. They will be coming back also in Eagle Rock, hopefully this year.
Is that right?
Pandemic with the theater and whatnot. So,
yeah,
but I remember the brick and mortar. So.
Well, there was another one. The Vidiots didn't have it. You went up Pico to Cinephile, right near Sepulveda and Pico.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, next to the New Art.
Yeah, was it called Cinephile?
Cinephile. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, those was kind of cool being near two
Yeah.
DVD VHS store rental places that pretty much had anything you needed.
Yeah.
Back in the day. Hey, we made the now I didn't fully understand it when it went down, but we made the last Blockbuster.
Mhm.
Do you know what that is?
So the one that's in Bend, Oregon, or
Yes.
yeah.
I didn't, and until I saw the documentary, I didn't. Do you remember this, Jeremy?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't really understand. I thought the last Blockbuster was just a clever name for a film festival, but it turns out it's pretty self-explanatory. It's the last Blockbuster.
Yeah, they have
pretty cool
they
story.
have Russell Crowe's old memorabilia from the Cinderella Man donated to the museum from the
Thanks
last.
to John Oliver. Yeah.
Well, I think this is great. I think this is kind of in bringing to Big Ugly. By the way, everyone, I'm Benji Carver here in the Warp Dimension with director, writer, producer Scott Viper and Jeremy Buzz. What was it?
Viper? I prefer Viper.
Viper? I think it's because it was like spaced out. I didn't space it out.
That's what I was called in high school.
Oh yeah, and Jeremy Osbern, and we're talking about their feature film. A very exciting film that I was very happy to see submitted to another Hole in the Head Fest festival. I helped program a couple of years and also have co-created with the Warp Dimension as well. And I'm very excited to have these two filmmakers here as well. And main reason why is I think The Big Ugly is a film that combines a lot of films that I love from Peck and Paw era, The Long Good Friday. I was actually just recently watching The Big Ugly before we were talking. I'm reminded of The Long Good Friday as well. And then, of course, just the malutations of and voice of Ron Perlman, waxing philosophies. So, Scott, Jeremy, thank you for joining me here in the Warp Dimension.
Thank you, Benji.
Afternoon, evening. Well, where are y'all coming from tonight? So,
go ahead, Jeremy.
I am in Lawrence, Kansas, just outside of Kansas City.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I'm growing my pandemic hair, and my pandemic facial hair is going through all sorts of iterations of things, and this is what it is at the moment. So thank you for welcoming me to this dimension.
Yeah. And are you from Lawrence, Kansas, or?
Yep. Yeah. So Lawrence is my home base, and then fortunate to hang out there and raise my son there with my wife, and then bounce around the country and the world and make films like Big Ugly with this cool dude. So yeah.
And Scott, where are you from? And where are you tonight? So
well, right now I'm in an undisclosed storage room behind a bar in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Nice.
But I've lived in Venice, California for since the early 90s, and grew up in Ohio. And but I think still in my blood, my home is Venice Beach, California.
Yeah. So you've seen the whole big wave of change. I moved to Los Angeles in 2010, and right when Dennis Hopper passed on, and I was like, oh, I missed the Venice that everyone talked about. Right when I got there.
I had a couple run-ins with him at the laundry. It was the laundry place. They also did Fluff and Fold, and it was on the corner. Phil Hernandez was the owner manager, always out on the corner, and that's where I would always see Dennis Hopper come in and out. So the rumors are true.
Yeah, the rumors. And so, but yeah, and the changeover, reading Bukowski's Hollywood and the stories he told about Venice as well. It's definitely a different world now whenever I visit the Los Angeles area.
It's a whole new place. But people, it'll go through its cycles. I think to have kind of experienced Venice from at the turn of the century and millennium was from 90. It seems like this conversation comes up once a week with an old pal who's but kind of from that 1997 to 2004, was a magical time.
Mhm.
And then it's kind of interesting because you hear people talk about South Beach the same way, and then you hear people talking about various. So maybe every place was an amazing, like it was an amazing time right up until the advent of Facebook in 2004. Then everything got awful.
Yeah. I wouldn't think everything got awful. It just again changes, wouldn't it? Like it needs to change.
I don't really mean that. No, everything's wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, you couldn't afford to live there. That was the big change. I always wanted to live on the beach.
Well, that's where the awful comes in because with Venice, I mean, it applies to many different places. It's like, I always said, well, the ghost of Jim Morrison is now gone. Okay. Because Jim Morrison was already gone, but you still had the ghost. But then once, excuse me, I'm saying that as if we're sitting with each other and I'm coughing. No, once you no longer have starving poets and guitar players and songwriters and screenplay, what do you call them? Writers.
The creative types.
Yes. Yes.
Or now called content creators.
Yes.
My rib to Martin Scorsese on content. So
content.
So yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I always dreamt of living on the beach in Los Angeles, somewhere or near the beach. And and when I got there, I was like, okay, I don't want to live in the Valley. What can I afford? And East Hollywood, Echo Park at the time was the place to be. And some great places. But yeah, it was always a journey to the beach. But now every time I visit LA, I'm always like, no, I'm just gonna go to Venice, or I'll go near there, near the beach.
I stayed up in Hancock Park for like 2 weeks with a buddy from college on Highland, and then another buddy from college called me. He was down in Venice. He's like, "What, Wiper? You're from Cleveland. You can't not move to California and not live at the beach. Get your ass down here." So I went down to his apartment, and his entire motorcycle was taken apart across the living room, and I had the couch. And then within 3 days, I found an apartment for $520 on the beach. That was 1994. So yeah, those days are gone. But it was, yeah, a lot of people just went right to the beach.
I mean, I'm from the Bay Area, so my travels weren't as far, but I definitely, the water is a lot better down south. I will say that. So, and Jeremy, did you make a journey out to Los Angeles, live there for a while, or have you just been keyed in with Lawrence, Kansas kind of?
I sort of jumped into filmmaking when the most recent tax incentive revolution happened, and so when I first started out, everybody said you have to move to New York or LA, and wanted to stay in the Midwest, and did, and I just started going to where the movies were. And so it was 1 year I would spend a lot of it in Louisiana, and the next year a lot of it in Iowa, and then just bounce all around as the incentives would change and bounce from state to state. But I've spent a lot of time out in LA, and shot a lot of projects out there, and have a place out there that I stay out when I'm out there, and enjoy it for sure. But it's nice to have some place to keep going back to that stays consistent while everything else is bouncing around.
Yeah, especially in a time like this that we're all living in.
Yeah, for sure.
That's interesting observation. That is, it might be helpful to people who, no matter what part of filmmaking they're going into. I hear a lot of people, especially this past year, like, oh, as soon as things get back to normal, we're just going to go out to LA and jump into my career. And it is, I think there's a point where you do need to be out there and meet people, but it was maybe Jeremy can back this up, but when we were filming Eastern Kentucky, you don't always, as the days go on, you get to know people, you find like, Steadicam, he drove up from New Orleans. And I noticed it first by seeing a lot of people have their own cars. It's like a head stunt guy and fight coordinator, he drove over from the Carolinas. And in the big difference, probably from 15 years ago, kind of everyone of the Keys were coming out from LA. and there's definitely a decentralization. Like it wasn't that that mass migration from LA. Everyone had time and kind of had knowledge and in Los Angeles, but more and more you see people can live anywhere.
Yeah, I think that's something. It was weird. My first 2 years in Los Angeles was about as much time as I ever lived nonstop, and then I would end up getting something similar. Jeremy, I know that kind of world. I worked in New York for a while as a production assistant, and then always just trying to get to New Orleans. I've only been there once. It was a great time, but it was just for like a fun couple of days with friends. But I always wanted to work on something there. But I ended up in Mexico. Went to film school in Portland. That was actually when I thought, oh yeah, that's where I really want to make movies. They make weird things up there, kind of thing. And then I realized it's such a small community on that end. No, there's some great mentors there, but I really was always wanting to branch out from that. So I definitely sympathize that. And actually, being from the Bay Area, oddly enough, that's where I found myself again back at home a few years before, and now I'm kind of. It's interesting. It's to touch, and you're around such great technology, but at the same time, like you always are, like being a traveling filmmaker. I think we all are, Scott and Jeremy are. I think that's something that's interesting. Like you kind of get this like itch to like, oh, like, and like The Big Ugly shooting in Eastern Kentucky, which is, I think, amazing that you were able to find production location and also the funding to get something like this project off the ground when, very few films get made, especially this interesting hybrid neo-Western action film that, again, kind of what I'm leading into is, Scott, where did this kind of homage to Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia meets Mean Machine, Lock, Stock, Tube Smoking Barrels, Gangster Number One? I would love to talk to you if you know Gangster Number One. That was Malcom. Yeah.
Paul Bettany. Is that Paul Bettany?
Paul Bettany, one of his first roles he ever had on screen.
I think, well, you hit it. You've hit it twice now. Sam Peckinpah. There was always a fascination with Peckinpah that probably goes back to Vidiots. Back in the day when you had to see it on TV or theaters. Then once you had access to a place like Vidiots, you just kind of, something about Peckinpah spoke to me, but the modern day Western, the setting for a kind of a morality tale, and various characters who are morally ambiguous, all common themes in kind of Western and film noir. But that kind of how in a nutshell, Vinnie Jones and I had kicked around the idea of something that I'd write for him, just because that's where you get the Gangster Number One and the kind of Long Good Friday Get Carter angle, which was for probably 15 years since Vinnie and I worked together in Australia filming The Condemned. He's such a fascinating character that. And the guy you get to know, who's your friend, it's different than the persona of Vinnie. And there's a real tenderness and a real kindness as well. Still, a tough guy. But it was always trying to, like, how can I as an American write a movie for my pal Vinnie and make it utterly American, but then dump some Brits in there. So, and then working with Paul Tarantino,
and
we kind of just went through draft to draft, and it was really like over the course of since 2007, it was a winding river that led me to Jeremy Osbern, put it on to, which was itself its own blessing.
And how did you kind of figure out, like, because as a cinematographer, director of photography, Jeremy working with Scott, settling on a look, the film is in itself. It's got this very, in a day and age where a lot of action films have been sort of not. I'm trying to be kind here, but at the same time, I think Scott you've worked on a few other features as well. A lot of things are really run and gun, and they're not as crafted as much as say a Peckinpah. I mean, Peckinpah, you know, that era of filmmaking, you know, they had months and months, you know, of production time, and something like this. How were you able to really, like, once production was in and shooting, how were you able to, because I love the look of this film, and I think that's something that it really looks like you took the time, you both took the time, as well as you appreciated your actors' time, because you get a lot of action films with these kind of cast members where they're only in 1 or 2 scenes and that's all you see, and then it's someone else's movie. And this time it's Vinny's story, it's Malcolm's story, it's Ron Perlman's story, and then of course Nicolas Braun, who I didn't even know about who he was until I just recently watched Succession. So Jeremy, sorry to travel on that a little, but how were you able, Scott, to really find this look? And like, was there films you looked at, or was there just a certain type of images? Because you're in the West Virginia area. There's a lot of these amazing photography that is from that area. The music also, I think of the Wild Whites of West Virginia as a documentary quite a bit. So kind of come from that adding. And
yeah, so when I had known the producer, Carrie O'Reilly, and she was working with Scott, and she sent the screenplay over, and I read through it. And so really the first time I read a screenplay, I'm not thinking about it in super technical way. I'm really getting the feel for it, and just like the initial images that come to my mind are not necessarily always like referencing other movies or like how it'll look like with certain lenses or whatever like that. That would be like the next couple reads. So when I first read through it, I thought that the story definitely yielded itself to a very painterly quality. And so there's an artist named Fabian Perez, and I thought of some of his paintings that I'd seen before that are the darkness goes dark, and there's characters that are in these like very interesting situations that are maybe like in harder points in their lives, and there's just a lot of emotion that you see through, but there's starkly lit, but then a lot falls off into darkness. And it's also got sort of an impressionistic quality that I thought would lend itself well to the look of this film. And I also thought that so that was like my initial images that were coming through my mind. And then thinking about some of the technical aspects, felt like shooting on anamorphic would be a good choice, in that you can sort of achieve some of that painterly quality where the background drifts out of focus in sort of like an impressionistic way, where images sort of elongate when they're out of focus in anamorphic. And so I just kind of typed up my thoughts and sent it to Scott, and it melded with his vision of the film. And then he right afterwards I flew out to Kentucky, and we just jumped in his car, and we spent my whole first day just driving around looking at locations and talking through the look of the movie and what he saw and what I saw. And then he obviously had been working on this for a long time, and so back in his office he had an entire wall of just reference stills and images that had come to him over the years and working on it, that we pulled from. But really early on we were able to come up with a pretty cohesive common vision for the look of the film, and it seemed to click right away.
And Scott, kind of, where were you you spent several years, it sounded like, because I remember The Condemned. That was my video store days, working at a Hollywood Video when that came out. And so that definitely, I remember distinctly that time when kind of that shift in action. Were you working always, and you worked a lot with Vinnie on that end, like how were you able to just sort of get this film made in a day when most action films, it just looks like it really, like, I'm really happy to see that you were able to get such a quality out of it, when a lot of films that I see that, oh, look at this cast, and look, it's mostly like, oh, in one day we shot all their coverage on this side of the room, and then we shot coverage on the other side.
I'll backtrack some, because how we got it made.
Yeah,
I'll kind of follow up on the cinematography, and what Jeremy did, which was incredible. But from my end, I think I went into this because of having done a lot of action. You got to move, you got to do so much a day, you got to do so much in a day, and action takes a lot of setups, and even pals of mine have said, yeah, I love The Big Ugly, but I could use a little more action. I said, well, that will be the next one. But on this particular movie, the acting and the cinematography were the two most important things going into it. And for kind of call it personal goals you have in life, but it was trying to, and in getting a movie made, you always have a good hero or protagonist, or maybe roles 1, 2, and 3. But a mentor of mine had said, the key to independent filmmaking is, how are roles 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and because ultimately you're not going to just get the boom, the Tom Cruise, the Ryan Gosling or Brad Pitt, and then the movie's all set. But the independent filmmaking really is about, and that's where the money meets creativity, because you end up kind of doing more of a ensemble, but that's because you got to keep getting quality in roles 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So that was always, and then I think there was the search for the look. I get manic and I get to talk about all the different things in my head, and I just kind of did when Jeremy and I first met, because he'd put up these paintings, and also he just kind of has this calmness about him, and listened to, and I listened, but it was like, he's like, I got you. and we talked, and some of it, the cinematography went in connection with the ensemble cast, which was, we can plan as much as you can plan a lot. It's what's the line Jeremy used? A good plan to deviate from. That's how we'd always kind of like, but until we blocked in the morning or after lunch or whenever we did, and see what the actor was going to do. So the two of us kind of always, we talk about things that had the general philosophy of the look, which is very noir, very dark as well, but building it based on what the actors brought, call it organic, if you will.
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of getting in a position as, that because at first, when I had heard about, because The Big Ugly was originally supposed to be did it have a theatrical release beforehand?
Yeah, it was in 70 theaters.
Yeah.
In July. It was out of the gate. It was one of the first films back in theaters when the theaters started opening up.
Yeah. So it was interesting, because, and then going the festival route a little bit more because of the situation we find ourselves in this day and age, is that when I first saw it, I was like, oh, okay, like this looks interesting, I'll put it on here. But it's like, you see this amazing large cast, but we get a filmmaker's dream on this, especially someone like myself, grown up on that. How were you able, Scott, to like get everyone at the same place? Because I normally, when I see this kind of cast in an action film, again, it's like you get one day with someone, 3 days with somebody else, and you got to really like piece them together, kind of thing. But it seemed like everyone was kind of present and there, like Malcolm's schedule and Ron and Vinny's schedule. I mean, Vinny's the star, but kind of thing. Was that sort of a trick, something you had to really work on, or were they just so committed to the script, kind of thing?
I think it begins with faith, and in the terms of by anyone's, the standard I use is Martin Luther King. Faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the entire staircase.
Okay.
And that's kind of every movie's journey. And then it goes into chaos theory and providence. But Vinny and I went out in the summer of 2017 and went out to West Virginia with just the existing script, which got totally rewritten, page 1. got rewritten in Kentucky. But I think it's that, I'd say the most important thing is that there be collaborations. But I think Vinnie was essential. I always believed in Vinnie as a leading man and, you know, actor, but I also believed in him as a business partner. And because I felt, and this is a choice a lot of filmmakers make too soon, like they're lonely, right? So they just want to have a partner, and sometimes suffer through the loneliness and make sure that partner is the right fit. But because what I felt like Vinnie and I teaming up could kick in most any door or pick it gently. And I would just being with him, he kind of had the connections that help, because sure enough, that led to Ron. First, the material has to be there, then access. And then we had a lot of allies in the business and the agencies, but Vinnie's ability to get the material to Ron, Malcom, really helped. And that was a big part of teaming up with him, was not just he's a fascinating character, but he would be a great 50-50 partner in kicking doors in.
And where did you find Nicolas Braun? Because I've recently watched Succession. I actually get his performance now more. I always thought his performance was like, man, this guy is like something odd with his delivery. And then rewatching The Big Ugly for this interview as well, I was like, okay, now I get it, like what this character is a lot more. But where did you find? I know he's.
I found him on this computer, the same meeting. There was links, and Succession hadn't come out yet. He'd done had a great body of work, but it was not. He was on a link with a bunch of auditions. I watched it, and it was memorable because it was quirky and something that no one else did. And then when we got when Brandon Scanar came on board to do Junior, and you're like instantly the Will character kind of had to be the other. Then I was like, that was a quirky guy, did stuff from like John Cusack, reminded me of like Grosse Point Blank, or it was just Nick is has a unique take on everything. So I was like, so the combination, that's kind of like, you know, casting's like a Christmas tree. You have your protagonist, hero. I don't like to use the word hero, but protagonist. And then you kind of have Malcom and Ron, and you keep fleshing out the Christmas tree. And each time you cast somebody, that kind of affects your choices as you move along.
Yeah, I think that's something that in his, just this character, because at first it's like you have all these heavy hitters, and then you have someone like Nicolas Braun who just like has this weird delivery that at first, you know, it's like almost like how do you deliver this like line? And then I think from there, I think that's just kind of it, and him. It's interesting, like, and you can see that he's a really big guy in real life, just on camera, because of like and stuff like that. So it's like he definitely can hold his own in height wise with all these big guys, but at the same time, like just delivery wise, it's like, you know, he's not gonna. It's just this interesting like ebb and flow with them. So I mean, it's something that's there. Is how long was the shoot for y'all in Eastern Kentucky? Did you have like, because everyone has different amount of days? Did you have to? I mean, you pretty much.
It ended up being 26 days, right?
6 days.
I think we had 26 days, and I think it rained 25 of those 26 days. So it was the absolute most amount of rain I have ever seen in my entire life. And
you need a water truck then.
Yeah. So we literally kept, you know, shifting things and shifting the schedule around, because it was like, oh, tomorrow is more rain, so we'll go to a cover set and we'll go inside and we'll film inside. And then tomorrow it's supposed to be sunny, and then we'd walk out tomorrow and, oh look, more rain that wasn't counted for. And so then we literally, by the end of the movie of shooting, we just ran out of cover sets. We had no more indoor locations, and so we basically just pushed off like the end climax, all night exterior climax with the big fight at the end, like to the very end, the last couple days of shooting, and it was like, all right, well, we're out of every other possibility, so we'll just assume it'll happen. And then it ended up working out, and we were able to shoot it, so worked out. But like there are whole scenes of the film that, like, you know, we shot half of it in sunlight, and then it started pouring rain, and we're just out of places to move, so we just set up lights and covered the actors and made it hopefully so that you couldn't tell that it was actually raining while we were filming that part. So
No, I think you're pretty solid on that end. Oh, and before he gets lost in the mix, Bruce McGill.
Boom.
How did you find Bruce McGill? He just seems to be always wandering around somewhere. You know, just picking it.
That's how I found him. He was just wandering around. Like, hey, you want to be in a movie? And
it's kind of, and he's like the one pulling most of the strings at the end of the day in this
Well,
movie.
there's a video that we gave to the guy that did all the behind the scenes stuff. There's not really but the raw footage of a clip that I took, it's Jeremy and I in the back of a pickup truck and Bruce McGill driving. And then who was Jordan? Jordan was up there with him.
yeah.
That's what was down. It was basically that was the crew for which that one clip of behind the scenes footage kind of saw, which was not our normal. We had a big crew. We had all the gizmos and toys, but it summed up Bruce because he was just, what do you need? And we just need you to drive. But Bruce came along really through another Vinnie. Bruce early on, Vinnie. I wasn't aware it was Bruce McGill. I was like, I'll give it. Hey son, I'll give it. When the script's ready, I'm going to give it to my buddy Bruce. I play golf with him, and then I realized it was Bruce. But Bruce read the script and said, he said, don't tell me. He goes, just let me read it, and I'll know depending on the budget where I fall. And then he read it and basically said, count me in for. In any way. I mean, meaning, and that friendship between Vinnie and Bruce was very strong. And then Bruce and I talked on the phone, and he's also kind of he's a scholar of literature and film. Bruce can run with the biggest film geeks. I mean, he could sit down and talk movies just as like a film buff. But the character of Milt, which wasn't very big on the script, just in page count and lines, but he's the kind of guy that sees a role and goes, oh, there's a lot here. There's a lot I can do visually. He calls it a presence role.
Mm-hmm. That's it's a good saying, the presence role of a character that's always there. It's the great example of the spear carrier in a Shakespeare play. It's always present kind of thing. And this character is kind of there's no small part also either.
Bruce could have very well. I mean, Ron is excellent, but Bruce could have done that role as well.
In something, it's funny. I recently picked up my girlfriend and I, we play some more independent video games, and Ron did the voice for a game called West of the Dead. And it's just have you heard of this video game at all on that? And it's just funny because I almost think like certain lines in The Big Ugly are also in West of the Dead, where he's in Hades somewhere. He's like a flaming ghost rider of the Old West character.
Well, that's why we were in Hades when we filmed this.
in lush green Smoky Mountain Hades. Yeah.
If the mosquitoes had been locusts, it would have, with the floods, it would have been very
where the rain would put the fires out once a day.
But as far as once Bruce, for anyone watching, The Insider, Bruce in a lot of films, but his role in The Insider when he rips up the courtroom in against Big Tobacco, it's that scene he has a monologue, and it's worth repeated viewing.
I need to go back. It's been a couple of years since
What?
I've seen The Insider. So.
The Insider I can watch over and over again. But the Insider's like, you know,
Definitely not Michael Mann. Yeah. On that.
Yeah. Like imagine when they like Mike Wallace comes in and is like, imagine CBS corporate is leaning on CBS News. Shocker. Like that was the beginning when actually a corporation could dictate news.
Yeah, it's oh man, yeah.
I recommend just the Insider, and the nugget is it's a lot of people forget Bruce is in there,
Yeah.
and a key cameo. It's more than a cameo, but he has one major scene. Insider's one worth revisiting at least once a year.
It's funny, as a kid, I watched him a lot. He was like a main guest star on Home Improvement. That was where I first saw Bruce McGill. My first memories of it, and then of course D-Day, is always immortalized on that end. So that's great to hear. He's the man, the myth, and the legend all in one. So on that end. So yeah, I think with The Big Ugly kind of, and also congratulations on getting on Hulu already, and winning on a little award here at Another Hole in the Head. On top of that, I was very excited that people, at least our audience, had the same response as that I had when we don't normally get movies like this. It's mainly the films that we get are more low budget, non-name kind of things, or really underground films that, like, even some people, the main stars, are like, I never made that movie. What are you talking about? And that's what we look for here. And so I was really excited to see that this film kind of came together on that end. And but again, yeah, Scott, like your bread and butter has always been these, kind of new era action films. I mean, with The Condemned, you did a Marine one as well.
Yes.
And so how did you find yourself in that market? Because it seems like you were a filmmaker in the 90s that kind of worked their way into, kind of doing these action films. But, your work is probably, as you see with The Big Ugly, it's like you're bringing in not just action, but these great dramatic thrillers. You're mentioning Gene Hackman films. How did you kind of find yourself into the action market, or the kind of post 80s action kind of market?
My second feature that I wrote and directed was A Better Way to Die. And it's kind of the last of the HBO movies, meaning when HBO had originals.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up but we made it for $2.2 million and shot for actually more days than we shot on The Big Ugly. And it had a lot of action, and it also, I mean, there's parts of it that are stand the test of time, but that got the attention of people at WWE, and I was brought in, I think, on a general meeting afterwards, and then about later that year, I got a call about The Condemned, which already had Stone Cold Steve Austin attached, but I think it was, I don't know, I'm just, because you never know what every single person in the movie making process thinks, and this was Lionsgate and The Condemned, and I was coming off a $2.2 million movie, and this was going to be, 20, with tax incentives, probably 23, 24 million. But I think there was action. Can you move fast? Because even though it was a big budget movie, they wanted it to compete with the bigger, $50 million movies. And they wanted, and they also wanted to know that the director could handle Stone Cold Steve Austin, who's a very good actor and a great performer, and his great, incredible persona presence. But also he's 250 pounds of muscle. And so they didn't want someone that would talk too much. Let me put it this way. And they didn't want your quintessential French director, right? Like talking, they wanted someone to talk plain English, and that would fit into the group with Steve and Vince McMahon. And so it kind of gelled. And that probably Steve and I for both college linebackers. So we, from the first meeting, I'd say probably having a life of playing football probably helped me more than as much as other things. Just because, just the way you speak about filmmaking, sometimes you can put it into the strictly creative world. That's probably how you talk with some actors. I think other times when you're just talking about how do we get this done, it's a lot like you're designing. It's a lot like a team sport.
Yeah, you're in your playbook kind of thing. Your X's and O's.
Yeah, and there was other aspects of it too because of the tax incentives in Australia. It was a very simple system. You get on a plane alone and you get off in Australia and you make the damn movie.
Yeah.
And so you're like, oh, the moment you said something like, well, I really like this, I really want to work with this. Like it's a normal thing. Filmmakers want to have a couple people. It was like, and there was no, it's like, no, you get on a plane, you get off and you start building a crew with all, and that turned out, Australians, it's a great film community.
Yeah. And it's interesting, but you also are from the film school, of filmmaking, where there was a longer production schedule time, and now schedules have shrunk quite a bit, I would say.
Yes.
How were you able to adjust that?
My first feature was when we made for $100,000, which was back then on shooting on Super 16 millimeter. Yeah. That's only money for, you're still almost doing it for nothing, because back in those days, so there was a lot of guerrilla filmmaking and there were a lot of short films, and I think that's probably the hardest transition for many filmmakers is, I was just watching, I think Jeremy and I were talking about the documentary that covers the island of Dr. Moreau.
Oh, the Island of Madness, the Island of Law.
Yeah. But that guy was a real genius. And it seemed like, I don't know, just watching the documentary, that the hard part was jumping into a system, and you got with ADs and schedules and UPM and that you can't just be kind of, and that's the fun of guerrilla filmmaking, is you get to kind of think more on your feet and go with the flow. And then you gotta, when the money goes up, you have to transition that into how do you work with a system where you have to communicate to everybody so that they have a general idea of what's happening in the next 5 hours.
And what was the first feature that you made for 100,000? What was it called?
Captain Jack.
Captain Jack. Is that available anywhere, or is that?
It's out there, but it is out there. But I personally have not digitized it to send. It's out there. But I'll tell you one thing, Jeremy, like a lot of that, I think to Jeremy's credit, because I'm sure he could do many styles, many he could walk off and shoot a studio, a huge studio film, but it's usually the DP that gives you the ability to still think on go with the flow. And it's like Jeremy and I go, okay, we can do that. And so that, your DP, your AD, and your director, that's the magic triangle. And as long as that triangle works smooth, you still can, every bit of guerrilla filmmaking does pay off. It's just you have to kind of translate it so that people know what's going on. Do you have anything to add to that, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what we were saying earlier, where you plan and plan and plan to have a plan to deviate from. So some of the magic in filmmaking comes from things that you don't foresee, and when you're on set, film happens, and then you go with the flow, and sometimes it turns into something magical. And if the light hits a certain way and you can grab a silhouette that you weren't planning on or whatever, but especially giving the actors and a director freedom to bring their full creative to it, and that was what was great about this film, was just having the freedom for the Scott to work with the actors and scene to scene and play within the space, and then we would have a general idea, but then we could fine tune it from there. And it was a lot of fun being able to make the movie that way and give actors freedom, and it was nice.
And I think it's interesting, like Jeremy, like, because I know from the research I did, before this, most of your work your body work is music videos and short films and stuff like that. Is that in working on that is that I think, yeah, like having to work fast, finding those visuals if you have. But again, of course, yeah, I do feel like in that transition of all these movies that I kind of have referenced, in that sense, there is this sense of you're always battling time a little bit more than you were like 30 years ago or 20 or even 20 years ago kind of thing. It's like, oh, I just need to get it done, crank it out. Or even Scott, yeah, your experience, I think, yeah, hit that ground running. You're one person on a plane to Australia, and then that's it. That's kind of on that level. So it's interesting to see that kind of that changeover on that, because as younger filmmakers, and I'm kind of in that weird middle zone now. I'm not a young filmmaker or a young film buff or and stuff like that. It's interesting to see like how fast things are going, but at the same time is really quality of story there. There's these big questions. Sometimes it's just luck. You get it because, hey, the script was good enough, or you're able to find something and pair it in there. But I think with like something like The Big Ugly, it's just really exciting to see like, hey, you were able to get through initiation with Vinnie Jones' association, but Scott and Jeremy, just in a sense of time and place for 26 days, like this amount of cast and story is kind of, it's just unheard of now.
When you it's called just push the button. I've heard just in the modern world, like, be it actors or a cinematographer. I think I was very happy to have, I had this level of trust, and it's kind of stuff you can say in pre-production to your team, and they hold you to it. If you build so that when you do hit those moments where it's like, just push the button. We didn't use that back in the old days, but now it's like, and that is the danger when you are just a filmmaker with a small crew and it's your money you fall into that. We got to get it done. We got to get it done. And it takes a while to be in the moment and say, it has to be great. It has to be, and I think I had an enormous amount of trust that Jeremy wouldn't let something be filmed if it was in his own way without it knowing it's going to look great. And that's the joy of also actors who, in the moment, saying, "Oh, he's difficult. She's difficult," but it's the same quality. And I think when, as a filmmaker, you realize you brought those people in for a reason, to keep you honest to your original pledge. And so, right when you're like, dude, just say the line. I never said that for the record, but you're like. I just have little memories of like even Russell Crowe getting an award for the Gladiator, and just whatever was happening between him and Ridley Scott, you knew that there was respect in the sense of maybe Russell Crowe demanded a few things like, what are we doing here? And it's that yin and yang and that struggle. And when when you're just in the mindset of like, like as Ed Wood to say, Dolores, don't get goofy. I've got 4 days to shoot this film. Let's roll, cut, perfect, print, moving on. When you fall into the Ed Wood complex, you got to build your team up front so people are there to slap you. And because you're sometimes in the director mode, you're sometimes in the producer mode, and you're sometimes into we just got to fucking get this done.
It's funny that you mentioned a Gladiator, because I think that is one of the most infamous films that did not have a script, or it had half a script when they were filming most of it. So they just kind of made it on the fly. And now it's this big movie kind of thing. But and Ridley Scott's relationship with Russell Crowe down the road is movie they've done afterwards has all been like a pretty full fleshed out script beforehand kind of thing. So I thought it was interesting kind of nature of, they built a bond that's there. But it looks like, but with this movie, like you really worked with Vinnie, like to get this, not just like a, oh yeah, let's just make another action film like a Condemned with like Vinnie, but really like it again, it's a lot of philosophy and waxing that really built in that nature of it. Because yeah, and then of course I'm intrigued to see, not to exclude Jeremy on that, but I'm intrigued to hear what your experience is working on like the Marine 3. It's something like, it's almost like the term, it's a VOD film kind of thing like that. Be able to build on that end.
Yeah, it's funny. I have very warm memories. I was just talking about Marine Homefront, Marine 3 the other day, and how much I learned on it. We had 20 days, and Ron Stannett was a old school DP, and the same deal. Like, you're going to Vancouver. I'd like to bring. Nope, can't. You just show up and you hire out of Vancouver.
Yeah.
But there was and working with the Miz. The Miz is a wrestler, and I really enjoyed. So, but definitely, I think that period led to something like The Big Ugly, which was, I think, and for those that are department heads, be it cinematographers or production designers, with Jeremy and with Ren, the most important thing before we start talking about technology is getting it. I'm always surprised that the best cinematographers are filmmakers in their own right, which is understanding the story and understanding because once you understand the story and the characters, you understand how to talk about how it translates to film. But there was always, I think when Vinnie and I started, when you said waxing poetic, or
it's sort of there's substance there. It's funny. It's like, because you think, oh, Vinnie Jones is going to be this total badass smashing heads from the get-go, and he's really more like Warren Oates in Premier Head of Frederick Garcia, this kind of broken down old man that's maybe one step away from the guy who he buys the drink for in the bar. Like, he's almost like, the only difference they have is maybe, he's just more gang connected. Yeah. But really, they're almost the same guy at pretty much throughout. And you don't think about that with Vinnie Jones so much. Is like, you're always thinking Mean Machine, which is my favorite Vinnie Jones performance, because he's playing Burt Reynolds' part from The Longest Yard there. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, like, this is more something there. And then of course, Ron Perlman kind of being this voice of kind of, I almost say, like, faux reason. It's like, he's just almost not denying who he is, anything like that, and saying, like, on that end. So, and then Malcom McDowell just coming in and just doing his thing and always being,
darkness, and that's what I was saying, it was always a theme. But with darkness, there's also light. And I did a job for John McTiernan as a screenwriter, and sitting with John McTiernan, he's like, yeah, I understand. Movies are all about joy. I'm like, okay. And I learned a lot from him. Then I was doing a job for Walter Hill, and Walter said, movies are all about sadness. Pathos. I'm like, yeah. And I was like, well, I probably a mix of both, but Peckinpah was always talked about pathos, sadness. But I think you drive through a lot of the United States, and you see kind of a crumbling America. You see a lot of people struggling, and and I think in our personal lives, there was Vinnie was going through a lot, and I think a lot of pathos came through, but we was always searching for some sort of hope and light. But it is, I hope that The Big Ugly will be reflective of its times, and a crumbling, captured a crumbling middle class, and that is that everyone in every character in some manner in The Big Ugly is struggling with pain and loss in some form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's definitely there.
And that's the kind of thing Jeremy and I first talked about, right? Like the kind of, and then translate that into the look of a film.
But I think the engagement though you have here is then how do you make it entertaining though? Or not entertaining, make it engaging? Because a lot of independent films are, you know, a French director, it's all about sadness, but with a movie like this, there's something that's more a little more heavy hitting. I just think it's interesting, like rewatching the scene where where Vinnie Jones fights Junior and he just gets his ass handed to him. And then he like the only way he was able to even get anything out of it was he just had to pick up a rock. That was the only way like to get out of that situation, to say, well, at least got a few good licks in, kind of moment. I thought that was just very like an interesting like kind of moment that's there or something. By the way,
that gets into, you know, screenwriting, which is figuring out where your audience is in every year. Where like what is the ADD quality? You know, people used to read newspaper articles now, and that got turned into Twitter. So it's like, so where are we? Joel Silver used to always call it a whammy of some kind every 7 minutes, and then trying to weave a storyline. You run things by, you know, I run it by my nephews, for example, and it's like, do you need a whammy now every 2.5 minutes or something to keep the story moving in the narrative? But I'm fascinated by, just in the long before it's on film, how much you have to the art of you know, screenwriting evolves it's evolving every 6 months.
Mhm.
Meaning if I try to sit young, you know, I don't sit anybody down, nobody listens to me, but if I sit my nephews down and be like, you should watch, you know, North by Northwest, Hitchcock. It's like, it's fascinating to watch them, like they're squirming 15 minutes in, just because by their standards, it moves so slowly.
Yeah, I think it's sort of in the engagement of that. We can definitely, but it's interesting because it's like for a movie like The Big Ugly, is that you are able to really make it a more of a personal film when, yeah, you don't have those whammies every 2 minutes or something like that. It makes you appreciate the film, but at the same, yeah, ADD quality of attention. I mean, filmmaking will be very different, you know, 20 years down the road of storytelling. That's the exciting part of how do you engage an audience, kind of thing.
And great actors and great cinematography helps.
Yeah, and lighting is always a key thing. I think editors as well too. We always forget about the editor.
Yeah, enormously. That's part of the writing process. Yeah. You know, I'm a huge fan of the old classics, and I watched them, and I can watch them over and over again. And then it's kind of like a lab test. You sit and watch it with someone and you're eager to, you know, force them to do your film festival of movies you love, and not everyone, but some hold up. Some I mean, what you see coming out of the studio system, it really is that's an art form that I don't necessarily have, which is the you know, how to hold them in Avengers 4.
How to hold them, how to fold them.
How to just that the major blockbuster where it's crazy how fast they move and they work, you know.
Yeah, but that's a whole different machine. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I mean, and Jeremy, you've worked quite a bit on these as camera and electric. I've noticed as well. And I think kind of, but you also have to think on your feet too. Whether it's I think you worked on my research. You worked on Red, one of the Bruce Willis films. Like that's something that was kind of this interesting hybrid again of kind of really fast engagement, big budget film, but at the same time also you're in an audience that it mainly is kind of getting older though too on that kind of film, and how things are made. So I think it's interesting, like how this kind of world, especially, and I specifically just kind of always hitting on action films in general, how that's changed so much from, like, as you talked about, Scott, you know, Walter Hill and John McTiernan's kind of engagement on those things. And so it's interesting to see that dynamic. And especially, I think it's at play a lot in your guys' film is, you know, how do you bring in, you know, an audience, but tell this really, like, yeah, it's a really, really tender, dark story. and also there's some, and then young people as well. But I don't know, they figured themselves out. Look at Dennis Hopper. He made amazing films in the 70s and 80s, and now they're finally getting released. So like no one knows, like The Last Movie and Out of the Blue are finally getting actual attention from a younger audience. So you just never know on that end. So but Jeremy, yeah, are you and Scott, what's happening now? I think everyone's kind of getting into some sort of work with projects. Do you have something coming up or anything excited to talk about or not talk about? Do the mysterious, like, I can't talk about it, but I'm excited kind of thing. So,
well, I can't talk about it, but I'm excited. But no, I mean, there are a lot of possible projects. There was potentially 3 movies in a row that I was about to shoot in 2020, and then obviously everything, like the rest of the world, got put on hold. So, there's a lot of potential possibilities, and the whole world is just sort of a waiting game right now. So there are some films being made, but at the moment, a lot of the industry is just sort of wait and see. So I'm excited about a lot of the potential that is coming up, and we'll get there eventually, but we'll just have to see when it gets there.
And Scott?
They're very similar. I think as soon as we wrapped up, I was in the mindset long before we started The Big Ugly that I had written 2 scripts, and my goal was to jump right into the next one. And probably my biggest demon in the Hollywood journey was, everything moves as if we're all going to live to be 300 years old. And in the past, and then I probably at the end of the summer, I just said, work on writing, and script is ready, everything's ready, but let's see where this world is in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Because just the way filmmaking might be right now, with certain, pick up the phone and talk to a lot of people who've gone through it, and hasn't been that, they've pulled it off, but it hasn't been that fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean,
if everyone's staying in different corners, and so we'll see. Really, humanity and the well-being of we're in a very kind of interesting spiritual time of change, a time of, I think, good things are going to happen, but we'll get through this. But I think Hollywood endeavors for the moment just aren't the number one priority.
Yeah.
And that's the joy. That's the joy of writing. Anyone has that ability, is that when the time is, because we were getting ready to go in Puerto Rico, pounding, and then Puerto Rico had a curfew till 5 p.m. But there's incredible things going on, and we'll all know our path sooner or later, as soon as we get through this.
I think there's something and this is kind of where the Warped Dimension kind of came from, is looking back at a lot of films that I grew up watched a lot, but then as I got older, I just sort of like, oh, they were my reference book, I haven't watched them in a long time, kind of thing. Like you mentioned The Insider, like I remember watching it as a kid, I remember watching it as a teenager, but I need to go back now and like look at that film kind of thing, because that's kind of like the last, no disrespect to Michael Mann, that's kind of like the last good era of Michael Mann. I'm very critical of this new era of Michael Mann. As someone who I really love Manhunter and stuff like that, but I'm like, when you mention stuff like that, I'm like, oh yeah, I need to go back. This past year has been a lot of time to reflect and create sort of this.
Well, I was on just as far as navigating the Hollywood system, I think I was a very high, very wise advisor was like, now's the time to make a movie because there's tons of talent available. And then you're like, well, there's a lot of talent available because people aren't choosing. There are a lot of smart investors and producers out there that are like, let's just see where things go. So yes, if like you have a scenario where you have something that can be shot in a remote location with maybe 2 actors or 1 actor with everyone else wearing masks, or some horror film, like there's a scenario where, yeah, there's a lot of talent available. If you're doing something that is a major production and you don't have the luxury to go 5 million over, so that's, you hear that a lot. Now's the time. Now's the time. All this talent's available.
Yeah.
Meaning there's a lot of people not working.
Yeah.
But
I've heard that ever since I moved to Los Angeles. It's like there's just cameras just sitting there. It's just collecting dust. And I'm like,
I read the regulations.
I mean,
read through the regulations, what you got to do. And if you have a studio budget, kind of enforcing those, if it was just up to me, Vinny, and Jeremy to ensure those regulations, that's, Tom Cruise is having a tough time with it, you know.
There's even that end of it. I think it's just interesting because I've never had a time where now I think everything just stopped, because particularly now we're in that year reflection of the last of 3 months of, there was nothing like, normally I myself make a short film or help out on a feature every year at some point if I have the time. Did not happen, but I was able to produce and help build like this festival kind of thing more. And so it got me to reflect and find movies like your guys' film when I would normally be like, oh yeah, that's on my list. And then like 3 or 4 years later, be like, I find it on Hulu, you know, I'm like, oh, that was a good one, you know, kind of thing. And so I think that's what I appreciate that in this last year has kind of been more on that end. But at the same time though, getting the creative juices kind of going is just sometimes, you have to like wait, like it's like, oh, we have the technology, but where's the story kind of thing? They have to kind of meet in that center. So, and then of course, where's the money? Of course, where's the money at the end of the day?
Well, money and time, that never goes away, right?
Never does.
What's the story you hear? I remember someone who worked on Titanic was like, are we gonna break for lunch? James Cameron was like, this movie's too big for lunch. But so just on all, no matter what size the set is, it seems like the money, stress, and the ticking clock are 2 universals, kind of like death and taxes.
Yeah, no, it's true. I'm just always on the hunt for a good line producer. Everyone wants to produce, but not line produce. And I'm like, hey, we always need a good line. You always need a good UPM. so yeah, out there. So I hope you had a good one on this one.
I did.
So that really makes the ship go very smoother. That and the good old ADs. The world would be lost with like on productions. So. But also probably makes your life a living hell, Jeremy, sometimes with an AD. Do I have the time? Do I have the time?
You know, as long as you have a good AD, then, you know, like on this movie, it was great. Like SB Weathersby was the AD, and he and I and Scott worked like a great team. And, you know, he genuinely appreciates cinematography. Like he loves it. And so SB would give us, he would work things around, and we'd be like, you know, before we started shooting, like we sat down and was like, what do you need? And you know, and similarly I would say, what do you need, you know, so that we can work together to help each other out. And there are horror stories of ADs and DPs that are just, you know, like trying to kill each other, and you know, it doesn't have to be that way, and like we're all working for the same goal, you know. And so but it's great to hear on that end. I my heart goes out to ADs. I can't. That's the one job on a set I could never do. I always just tell people, like, you can do anything else. You can even run coffee, but being actually a first AD, knowing like how much time and safety is in your head, it's just like, I can't. I can't think that window, you know, or and then be able to negotiate kind of thing. So I always say, good first AD. And when you find a good one, you just want to hold on forever, because good AD is worth their weight in gold for sure.
Yeah, it's better being a second. I always tell people, like, seconds, you just deal with actors, and you're like, oh, they're in the chair, they're not in the chair. Okay, bring them to set. So, you know, you're like on that end. So
what is the magic triangle? Director, AD, DP. If that magic triangle really is the bridge of going from guerrilla filmmaking into a larger budget, because that that magic triangle works, the scheduling of the film will, it's the engine. It's the engine that allows the creatives to do what they do, and a good AD like SB, like they do have a great ADs have that great mind that can change the board. Say, okay, Malcolm can't make it for 10 days in the middle of the month because he's going to France, and then they're like they might go, can't be done, and then you kind of look and they're like, it can be done, and then they just start rearranging the board, and it's a level of genius, but they also understand what the DP and the director are for. So, and it was one of the hardest things, I think, hiring an AD when I was 23, not understanding what exactly you're looking for, because it's a rare skill that makes. But talk about lessons. Probably I learned work. I worked on Pearl Harbor. And I think his name's Casey Hodenfeld, and running at the time the most expensive movie ever made. And you're like, wow, that, like, you come on the set and you almost think he's the director. I mean, clearly it's Michael Bay, that, but you're like, when it gets to that size and the military's doing this and the jets are doing this and the aircraft carriers this, and you're like, wow, then you're like, hey, this thing doesn't run. Like, if there's one guy who's sick, that panics the money, it's the AD. You realize what a key position it is to allow the creatives to do what they do.
It's true, and then
and usually they're the ones, at the rap party, everyone's celebrating with ADs, like really celebrating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you agree with that, Jeremy?
Yeah. Some of them celebrate a little too much.
Exactly.
Usually they're the first person's gone in my experience. I have like, where'd they go? Oh yeah, the movie's over. They're done. So they took the check and ran. So well, thanks so much. I think we'll wrap it up on that end. But thanks so much, Scott and Jeremy. Big Ugly is out on Hulu. You can watch it now. And we'll hopefully look forward to seeing what comes down the road. But thank you for this piece that I was able to submitting. I'll also thank to Michael. The last name is escaping right now. He was the producer who set up this meeting.
Mike Downey. Yes.
What was his name?
Mike Downey.
Michael
Downey.
Yeah.
Producer extraordinaire.
Yeah. So Michael Downey was who submitted it to Another Hole in the Head. And
well, thank you for creating the film festival and for having us and for the award.
Yeah, George Cascalian Jr. created the festival. He just brought me along. I'm like one of the
take the credit. Take the credit.
Yeah. Well, work to mention more of our big thing we've done the last year on this whole online business. It would have been great to bring, Another Hole in the Head will hopefully be, we usually at the end of the year, is in an underground theater, THX Sound. It's an amazing experience. It was great to see that as a filmmaker myself, on your hard work to actually see your movie on a big screen, which is a very rare thing, even before COVID. So, hopefully, we'll hope you're able to make, movies like The Big Ugly, and we'll get you back again in a theater. Hopefully
the truth is we start production in 7 days. So, but
and you're the only person, right? You're just alone again, building the crew.
I just had breakfast with Jeremy this morning.
Yeah.
At the hotel, but
we're filming it on Zoom, and
we can't talk about it. We have to say all this stuff. Oh, it's really hard and it's really tough being shut down. Where we start filming in 7 days.
I'm actually in that room right behind him.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Have you noticed that?
It's all a big illusion. That's why there's a little bit of echo in Scott's mic.
I had to shut the door because Jeremy's on the other side of this production house.
I thought because Jeremy, you're like your camera comes in a little less white wall, and so I thought, oh yeah, your cinematographer doesn't want a white wall. It's a little more shaded, a little more filtered.
So, but yeah, because we're on at midnight, so
yeah. Well, right on. Well, stay safe, stay sane out there, but keep making stuff. I mean, it's just, again, it's a pleasure. Thank you for sitting down with us.
Likewise. Thank you, Benji.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Benji Carver, and you can find me, as always, at Warp Dimension at Movie Hopping Benji. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. Vinnie Jones's IG is hilarious. I don't know if you do Instagram at all, but Vinnie Jones's Instagram is great. It's just usually him like driving like a madman through Los Angeles, saying he's gonna go golf and eat breakfast and stuff like that. So if you haven't, check it out.
If I looked at his social media, I probably wouldn't be able to write characters for him.
I mean, I think
I try to tap into the tender side.
Tender side on that end. Right on. Well,
Benji, thank you very much.
Pleasure. All right. Have a great night out there.
Yeah, you too.
God bless.